Hello there. You're watching Context, where we closely examine key global and regional developments. Iran and Armenia, two nations that have cultivated strong and intimate relations over the past few decades, are quite often said to have been bound by common interests, sharing identical position in connection with most sensitive regional issues. Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi's visit to Yerevan, which is still underway, in many ways is viewed by many as testifying to the uniqueness of this relationship, which, amongst other things, is regarded to be a product of necessity of containing common rivals. At a joint press conference with Armenian Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan, the top Iranian diplomat welcomed the finalization of the negotiations on the text of the draft peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia, encouraged to sign the document as soon as possible. The Iranian minister reiterated what he described as Iran's unchangeable position of respecting the independence and territorial integrity of the countries, inadmissibility of changing the existing internationally recognized borders, and geopolitical changes in general. Iranian-Armenian relations are not without their complexities. Quite often, Yerevan's close ties to Tehran have been described as a potential wrinkle in Yerevan's perceived pivot towards the West. For Yerevan, it has been the task of some delicacy, requiring finesse, persuasion, and some form of subtle alacrity to retain close economic and political relationship with Tehran and remain aspirational in the context of EU integration in terms of relations with other Western actors. And given US sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, Yerevan's economic and political relationship with Tehran may potentially come under some fresh scrutiny, as Armenia apparently is seeking to affiliate itself with transatlantic institutions. Joining us now to discuss this latest development, Ahmad Alili, Director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, and Turaj Shalili, Analyst joining from Tehran. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Turaj, my first question is going to be addressed to you. Iran and Armenia are incredibly close to each other. This point has been reiterated on a number of occasions today. And in fact, some Iranian and Armenian officials described these relations as being so close that they could have been even described by means of designation known as two states and one nation. What does underpin this incredibly close and intimate relationship between Tehran and Yerevan, in particular in the light of the ongoing trip of Iranian Foreign Minister to Armenia?
Thank you for having me, Orkhan. There are a number of factors joining Iran and Armenia closely together. First of all, on the bilateral side, Iran and Armenia have centuries-old relations. This is not something back originating from 20 or 30 years ago or after the post-Islamic revolution era. And there is a large diaspora of Armenians living in Iran, estimated to be around 150,000, and Armenians have their own members of parliament in Iranian Majlis, mostly from Tehran and Isfahan, Julfa region. So we see that these relations are, in one sense, historically twined together. And also, Iran and Armenia have signed agreements recently to bolster their bilateral ties economically and also in trade. And back in 2023, the bilateral trade rose for more than 40%. And it included infrastructure projects, energy, transit, and also they also to launch 3 new border areas in order to increase trade between the two countries, the two bordering countries. Of course, it is an open secret now that relations between Iran and Armenia are quite friendly. And we shouldn't forget, you mentioned the case of sanctions, US sanctions against Iran, but one should also take into consideration the powerful Armenian lobby in the United States, which Iran, I think, thinks that it can be useful when Iran gets involved in indirect talks with the United States. And this is as far as on the bilateral side, Iran and Armenia are achieving or intending to achieve. And again, Iran has said that its relations with neighboring countries is not against a third country, any third country. Iran was impartial in the Karabakh conflict, in the Karabakh war, and said that it respects regional integrity as well as sovereignty of the regional countries in its neighborhood, and it's also in its immediate neighborhood. It means Armenia and Azerbaijan are in Iran's immediate neighborhood. So Iran didn't want to see that falling, or in fact spiraling, this crisis spiraling out of this region where it has borders. Now that Foreign Minister Arakchi is in Iran, and he held talks with his Armenian counterpart, and this was one point that he insisted and stressed, that Iran, as you said, wants territorial integrity and sovereignty of the regional states maintained, and that he also welcomed the integrity between Armenia and Azerbaijan to be signed, because it doesn't want to see any crisis in its neighborhood. Of course, as you know, there are Armenian repatriates or diaspora, and also there is a large community of Azeri-speaking Iranians who Iran doesn't want to lose the interest of any of these ethnicities or its population against the other one or for the other.
Yeah, Iran has got this, as you described, Armenian diaspora inside, but also, of course, when you said about Azerbaijani-speaking Iranians, they constitute quite a considerable proportion of Iranian population. I don't know what exact figure, but quite a considerable proportion. Ahmad, Iran's foreign minister, Mr. Arakchi, has emphasized in his speech when he was addressing together with his Armenian counterpart, Arat Mirzayan, he emphasized the strategic significance of the South Caucasus as a region to Iran, which is probably understandable. The region is very important to Iran. It's in its immediate vicinity, neighborhood. What are Iranian priorities in this region?
Well, I cannot tell you what are Iranian priorities in the region, but I can perfectly explain to you what are the perceptions about Iranian priorities in Azerbaijan, right? Yeah. So that is why, whatever I'm going to tell, it's going to be perceptions from Baku. And I believe that it's very important that we take these perceptions into account, because perceptions in this case plays quite important role. For example, the perception of the power of Armenian lobby in Iran can be very important factor in this issue. In Azerbaijan, we are, for the last 30 years, Azerbaijan research institutions studied Armenia closely, Armenian diaspora closely. And I would say that while studying Armenian diaspora in detail, what Azerbaijani research centers understood, the perception how Armenian power is perceived in Russia, Europe, and United States, that kind attracts even more. That makes Armenia even more attractive for these powers. Especially, the Armenian lobby can create this perception that they are almighty powerful in Russia, in European countries, and they can create this perception that they have quite influential position in Europe, in Russia, or other parts of the world. And that would be a point when which helps Armenian lobby to grow bigger, to exert more influence in its regions. The same thing about Iran. We are witnessing that the perception about Armenian lobby is quite significant in Iran. Iran believes that most of the problems that it has with the European powers, with the United States, it can solve through Armenian diaspora, Armenian lobby, and that is one of the elements what makes Tehran to closely follow, Yerevan's decisions on certain issues, especially especially with the recent developments in South Caucasus. But the fact is, since 2020, we are seeing that there are quite many European researchers, quite many European decision makers. They are challenging that perception. They don't believe in that that image that Armenian lobby create about itself in Europe, in the United States. The same thing about Russia. Russia doesn't believe that, before 2020 war, Russia would have a couple different perception about Armenian power in Europe, in the United States. But once the 2020 Karabakh War happened, that illusions that they went away. But we are witnessing that the certain illusions, they are staying, they are strong among Iranian elite in Iran, and they still believe that Armenian lobby can help them to advance their agenda in Europe and the United States. So that perception is very important factor in this case. And you are rightly mentioned that, when we are talking about the 150,000, if I'm not mistaken, that was a number which was made audible. That is the number of the Armenians in Iran, but the number of the Azerbaijanis are much higher. Right. So there are circles in Azerbaijan, they make audible a couple different numbers, and I haven't heard any number that less than 25 million, right? So it's much bigger number. So why the community of 150,000, they can influence certain decision-making processes, but the community of 25 million, their opinions, they are not taken into account. So this is a big issue for Azerbaijan, and I believe in this context we have to understand one more issue also, that right after big developments taking place in the region, in South Caucasus, we are witnessing Iranian officials visiting Armenia. That happened before, in the previous months we would see that once there is some big development, Iranian ambassador in Armenia or some high-level Iranian officials visiting Yerevan and making certain messages that Azerbaijan closely follows. And it means that Iran wants to be very active in regional affairs. But the thing is, the perception in Baku is that Iran opted out for friendship with Armenia, and Azerbaijan can be very, very instrumental in its foreign policy with Russia and Turkey. And thanks to these factors, we are seeing that Hakan Fidan-Lavrov recent meeting, they are they are agreeing so many issues, and the Baku is part of this issue, and the talks, but that Iran opting out for Armenia, that makes Iranian position in the region a bit limited. So that creates a big problem between Baku and Tehran, and that leads to other factors. I'm going to stop here, but of course, there are other issues that we are going to.
Yeah, we found ourselves in the midst of Tehran, Baku, Yerevan triangle, and of course ethnic Azerbaijanis. I'm not entirely sure to what extent the fact that there are so many Azerbaijanis, a considerable proportion of Iranian population being Azerbaijan, is a good thing for Tehran-Baku relations. Maybe it's an impediment, maybe it's a part of the reason why this relation have never been problem-free. But let's move into the bilateral Tehran-Yerevan dynamics. Turaj, in January 2023, Iran's ambassador to Armenia declared that Armenia's security is Iran's security. Iranian-Armenian officials have touched upon this subject on a number of occasions. They talked about the implementation of new projects between Armenia and Iran in the economic sphere, including infrastructure and energy, in particular North-South corridor, which seems to be very key both to Armenia and Tehran. So what are the key components there, you think, will be discussed between Foreign Minister Arakchi and his Armenian counterpart and also Armenian Prime Minister? What are the key areas that the sides will be focusing on in the context of this particular trip?
Sure. I'm not much informed or well-versed in what was the agreement in 2023. And of course, a lot of water has passed under this bridge in this region since 2023. And as you know, there was the second war, Karabakh, and some of the geopolitical conditions have changed. Then, Armenia has tried to redefine its alliances and taken distance from Russia toward Western countries, European countries. As you know, in the last days of President Biden's in office, they signed a strategic agreement with ministers of Foreign Minister of Armenia, Secretary of State of the United States. And of course, this corridor, any corridor, could be a vital factor for any country, including Iran. And I think Iran does not see the interest or security of Armenia as its own security, but all the neighboring countries. And for that, a special case maybe Armenia was pinpointed by the Iranian ambassador. Naturally, they talk about their own portfolio, but I think all ambassadors deem it so. Their point, these corridors or these routes, land, sea, or airborne, they are vital for any country. Iran doesn't want to see that it is strategically suffocated. It is not, and it does to see that. Iran cannot remain indifferent to what is happening in the region by the introduction or arrival of in extraterritorial countries which are coming to this region, not for regional interest, but for their vested interests. And this is something that Iran doesn't want to see, and Iran doesn't want to compromise its national regional interests for this purpose. And that's why Iran is supporting such a corridor, north-south or south-north, from India to Iran, from Iran via Azerbaijan, via Armenia to Russia and to Europe.
Ahmad, it has been said that Iran's border with Armenia was and is, in a sense, a lifeline for Armenia. It's believed that this border has been the main point through which Russian weapons have circuitously entered Armenia since 2020 and before and afterwards. And now with Armenia increasingly purchasing military equipment from India, Iran is still quite crucial as a geography, as a territory, and in that context the border between Iran and Armenia are absolutely key. Bearing in mind all of the things, do you believe that Iran is genuinely interested in Azerbaijani-Armenian peace deal, which will see the full normalization of relations between these two countries, decreasing the necessity of Armenia relying on Iran?
So this is a very important notion. You know, like if it is a lifeline for Armenia, why Iran is interested in that? You know, if Iran is interested in that, it means that Iranian strategic thinking also says it's as a lifeline for itself. But then the question arises that if there's lifeline for Iran also, so it means that there is Iran can reach European Union, Russia through Turkey and Azerbaijan, right? So this narrow pass that can be replaced by the territory passing Turkey and Azerbaijan. Does this cooperation with Armenia has any anti-Azerbaijani, anti-Turkey component? If so, then Azerbaijan and Turkey should react appropriately, right? So this is one issue. The other issue is that if it is lifeline for Armenia, so it means that this lifeline is going to be used against Azerbaijan. So once you declare it as a lifeline, you are putting Azerbaijan in a mode that in a defense position against any ideas that this corridor should be used against Azerbaijani national interests. So if each country has a right to build its defense sector, and I believe that Armenia feeling comfortable, it's part of the future regional integration plan also. So the country is feeling prosperous and secure. That is the way to regional integration that Azerbaijan also pushes forward. But the thing is, once you want to have that, you are talking about that while not signing a peace deal, but arming yourself and using this lifeline, as it was labeled. So it raises a lot of alarm in Azerbaijan, and once you label it as a lifeline, you have to expect that it should cause some reaction from Azerbaijan. So it's a very natural way of doing business.
Turaj, Ahmad earlier stated that, of course, Azerbaijan has nothing against bilateral Iranian-Armenian ties. It's a relationship between two sovereign countries. But the question here is that when this relationship is so close and intimate that Azerbaijani-Iranian relations suffer for a number of reasons, it's actually against Iranian interests because it does limit Iranian presence in the South Caucasus. That's a perception that many analysts, including Ahmad, has here in Baku. What do you make of that perception?
After the Soviet Union collapse, there was a security vacuum in the South Caucasian region. And Iran, along with Russia, and then joined them, there are rival power wielders or regional players in this region. Well, Iran, for that sense, doesn't want to compromise its traditional, historical influence in the South Caucasian region. And for that reason, I think Iran will improve or foster its relations not only with Armenia, but also with Azerbaijan, as well as in South Caucasia with Georgia. And everybody knows there are historical bonds in all these three countries between Iran. But perhaps one can argue that relations between Iran and Armenia are friendly than what is it between Iran and Azerbaijan. That could be argued, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Iran and Azerbaijani relations are not friendly at all. This is rejected. You can say, or one can say that they are not as friendly as, but they are already friendly. And if Iran is bordering Azerbaijan with some like 40 kilometers only, the border with Azerbaijan, not considering the Caspian Sea, is more than 200 or about 300 kilometers. Yeah. And it will be very foolish if Iran wants to, in a way, sacrifice such long and strong bonds with Azerbaijan, with another country, with another neighboring country. At least this is not the impression in Iran or among Iranians, or not only among Azerbaijanis in Iran, but among Iranians at large, that they don't have any point against Azerbaijan. They don't see it. Yeah. And of course, they are living peacefully and friendly with Armenian expatriates and also the Azerbaijani ethnicity here, which build up a very, very large minority. So this is, from the view from Baku, or could in one way or another be seen that Iran is not as friendly. But yeah, that doesn't mean that Iran is an enemy of Azerbaijan, never. And as Foreign Minister today said that,
sadly we have to finalize.
We will be happy. We will be quite happy if such a peace is established.
Effectively, what you're saying, Turaj, is that good Tehran-Yerevan relations do not necessarily mean that Baku-Tehran relations should be bad. But what Ahmad said was that at the expense of deteriorating relations with Baku, Yerevan and Tehran have been improving this relation with Yerevan. And of course the Engazur corridor, overland passage connecting mainland Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan exclave, that is a 40-kilometer corridor, which is effectively the land border between Iran and Armenia, and that is of course a key sensibility. Perhaps we'll be able to touch upon that particular issue in more detail in one of our future conversations. I'm most grateful to both of you, Ahmad and Turaj. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much and happy Nowruz.
Thank you very much indeed. This was Ahmad Aleli, Director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, who joined from Baku, Azerbaijan, and Turaj Shiralilu, political analyst who joined from Tehran, Iran. We discussed Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's trip to Yerevan, bilateral ties between Tehran and Yerevan, also, of course, Azerbaijani sensibility, which has always been very key in the context of Iran-Armenian relations. See you very soon.